Hi, Cathy. Oops. Can you hear me?
Hi, Terry. Can you hear
Hi.
me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, awesome.
So good.
Yay.
My first hurdle is like worrying about the technology. We got that one solved here.
Well, good. So you're in a sunny room.
Well, I'm actually in what used to be the maid's room of our house.
Huh?
It's an office slash laundry room because it has the best Wi-Fi. I can sometimes get it in other rooms, but I'm not going to chance it today. I need boosters, extenders, but
Yeah, Jack found a booster, I think for like 20 bucks. Can't remember if it was at Walmart or if it was at that Micro Center.
and
And
it works.
it works pretty well because his office is upstairs, I'm downstairs, and um, the router is in my office. Like sometimes we like to sit outside and sit in the front of the house, and we can't get Wi-Fi outside. And the router really helped, or the booster really helped.
Oh, yeah. I was going to try and get my son over here to do it, but maybe I'll try it to keep it simple first.
So I thought I kind of went through all your notes, and I thought we could talk about how'd you get started. I kind of broke it down. How'd you get started? How do you prepare to write a memoir? And then the other one was how to spot opportunities and wisdom shared. That's kind of in there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some, I think, unique things that, like that map with the legend that Jack did. I
Uh-huh.
think that's a real good thing to do with a memoir. I mean, mine were kind of, well, particularly the one on the boys was kind of ideal for such an edition, but you can do one of your neighborhood. People like that. People like maps. They may not want to, consult them anymore when they're on the road, but I think people like, especially readers.
Well, visuals, it breaks it
Yeah.
up, breaks up all that copy.
Yes, you can see what they're talking about as well as read it. Um, Recipes. Uh, I think I love, I may or may not try it, but it's really interesting if you're, particularly if you're, an ethnicist, a culture or ethnicity you don't know. Like when my one son was writing about the Middle Eastern food that he ate, I liked reading about that. So I put some recipes in my, he didn't give the recipes, but he gave the menus. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
a big hit, and you can kind of work it in usually. If you think about it. Well, I'll get my notes here. Photos, of course, if you can. I didn't actually use an index in the second book, but I think that did a lot for me. It was a much longer book for one thing. That was one reason I chose not to do it. But
Well, and you had a lot of graphics in book 2,
mm-hmm.
which made it, I think, much, closer to it's also like a coffee table book. Excuse me.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know Nicole.
I see some people joining.
Good.
Very cool. Had a lot of people interested. So we have the meetup group where it's just kind of a feed, and then they click a link and they go and they sign up for this. And there are several people that came from meetup.
That was one of the meetings I went to. We met out at, where were we? On Manchester and West County in the restaurant's meeting room, or?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to do those in person. And then,
person. In the old days.
yeah, back in the old days.
Yeah.
And that was kind of fun because you could meet people face to face, and then it would get kind of crowded. And so I said, okay, well, let's just do this online and see how that works.
Hi.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hello, hello.
Have you and Terry met from SLPA?
I'm not sure.
I don't remember meeting you, Jennifer. I haven't been going very regularly in recent, well, nobody's going anymore, but past year or so.
I've been a few times, but not recently either. So we probably, you look familiar, so I've probably seen you there, but I'm not sure that we've met. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's probably been 3 years since I went. Jack was going for us.
Yeah.
Probably over the last 3 years.
I was often sitting next to Jack or near Jack.
I've definitely seen you there. Yeah. So.
You would get to hear lots of his comments under his breath, I'm sure, then. Yeah.
Not so much. I asked him once, I said, did you miss me? He was very diplomatic. I don't think he answered. That's one less writer he's kind of over and done with. He did it all, and we are
recording. Welcome, everyone. Today we'll be speaking with Terry Mulligan. She's a memoir author. And before we welcome Terry, I want to remind everyone of a few logistical details. Please mute yourself on your end so as to avoid any background noise. Please find your chat button on your screen, usually down at the very bottom, the little bubble with a tail. If you have any questions while we're talking, please type that into the chat box and we'll try and get to your questions. And we promise to end the call around noon or shortly thereafter. We try not to go beyond 12:15. And today we'll be talking about we'll be talking about memoirs. And our theme for 2020 is inspiring authors. So every other month we're interviewing an author, and every other month beyond that, we're interviewing a vendor who supports authors. And whether you're listening in for an author or a vendor, our goal here is to offer some knowledge, some ideas, some wisdom, and hopefully some opportunities to motivate you into starting or finishing that book that you're working on, no matter what your genre is. So as I mentioned, today's guest is Terry Mulligan. She and I originally met, I don't know, several years ago through the St. Louis Publishers Association. And it's probably been at least 6, if not more, years. Terry is a former writing center instructor at the St. Louis Community College. She was born and raised in Harlem and now lives in St. Louis, where she taught writing at that writing center. She's the author of Sugar Hill, Where the Sun Rose Over Harlem, which won 2 Benjamin Franklin and 1 Ippy Awards, as well as other honors. Her most recent books are Afterlife in Harlem and a second memoir, These Boys Are Killing Me, Travels and Travails with Sons Who Take Risks. That's the one I am most familiar with. So welcome, Terry. I'm thrilled to have you here today.
Thank you.
Awesome. So one of the questions that I get a lot is from authors is, you know, I have so many great stories that I want to tell about my family and my life. How do I get started in writing a memoir?
Well, mine is actually conceived a very long time ago, and I just had to write it. I mean, it took me 30 some years to finish it, but I think you get started by just having the desire to want to write it. I think every life, every family is worthy of telling a story. You do need to know how to do it. That helps a lot. they say to write the best book you can. That's really important. As time went on, I thought it was more and more important to write the story I wrote from my first book.
So your three books, I know the last one's a memoir. Were the other two also memoirs?
The first one is, yes, that is definitely a memoir. It's about life in Harlem. And Harlem is actually one of the characters. When I came here in 1971, Harlem was on the skid, and Mike and I were a pretty unusual couple back then. And I would get comments like, one of my...
Oh, we're losing you. Let's see, Terry, we can't hear you. You may have to go back by the window again. We've lost your feed. So bear with us in the world of technology, folks. Terry may get to call back in. Let me type her a message that we have lost you. I'm going to stop the recording real quick. I apologize. I was looking out the window because I saw someone in my driveway, and we've, what's it been? 2016. We had a storm come through and took out a neighbor's tree, which took out our driveway, our garage. And there's an old telephone pole back there that we've been after them 4 years to come take down. And I think they're finally here to look at it today. So luckily I was texting Jack, my husband, upstairs to say, somebody's in our driveway. So we are recording again. Terry, welcome back. Thanks everybody for being here. We were talking about writing memoirs, and let's focus on the third one, the one I'm most familiar with. These Boys Are Killing Me. Everybody asks me whenever I take that book or use it as a sample book, people say, oh, what's that book about? So tell us a little bit about that book and how it came to be.
My sons backpacked around the world separately and alone in 2001 and 2003. And I was pretty nervous about the trip, to put it mildly, their trips.
What ages were they when they started backpacking?
I think they were both 25, so they quit good jobs, gave up apartments, the whole 9 yards, although one had a house and he got renters. I have two sons, and both of them did it. But I kept their emails, and I kept their emails because I didn't know if I'd ever see them again. And I guess about 4 years ago or so, 5 maybe, I found their emails. I actually found I used to print them out. I found them in a folder, and I decided they were pretty special because, one, the world had changed so much in a negative way. A lot of the places they went, this was even before now, of course, you couldn't go anymore. You wouldn't be welcome as, since the Iraq War and so on, wouldn't be welcome as an American, which was totally different. One son was in Egypt on 9/11, and I began to feel when I finally got a hold of him, or he could call me, that he was safer there than we were, because people were just so sympathetic, and all the Egyptians, all the Arabs. So anyway, that's in the book, and they had pictures, which of course weren't very often very good because you didn't know they were going to be in a book. But maps, as I say, already, I was just telling Cathy, maps are a really good thing to put in a book. Jack did this legend. Unfortunately, you may be able to see it. The markings that show their trips from Europe through the Middle East, Asia, Africa are not on this. I went over to the copy store, tried to print, nothing was cooperating today. But that was a really good thing. You could just look in the book. It's very clear, and see where they went. And
route they took.
Yeah, that became a useful tool because their travels were so far reaching. It was a useful tool to have in the book. And
yes,
that's one of the things that I love about your book, because you were able to use some of the postcards, some of the photos. And then one of the other tricks I remember that we did was some of the emails would be from one son and other emails would be from another. So we used different fonts to delineate which son was speaking.
right, and different from my font also.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we used some of their letters. I forget which son it was. I thought it was beautiful handwritten letters, and perhaps these were from his journal that he kept. Yes. And we used some of that as a background. So it ended up being a beautiful book.
It is a beautiful book. It's all in color, which is beautiful to look at. Unfortunately, it's kind of expensive to buy. This is what his journal looked like. There are 89 pages. I think you can see the small writing.
Yeah.
In addition to the emails, the journal was, I was humbled that he shared that with me. I also wove in, I spent a year in Europe traveling. A lot of it was traveling. And I compared the differences to then and now, which people say was a pretty interesting. It's kind of a very odd book. It doesn't really fit some, genre that they want, on which shelf does it go on kind of thing. But I think it's mostly travel.
It's a travel memoir. If I were to walk into a bookstore, for one thing, I'd have it on an end cap to make sure everybody saw it. And then two, I'd ask for it to be both in memoir and travel. Now, so what was the purpose, do you think, of the big picture purpose of you wanting to write this memoir?
Well, there's a lot about raising kids who take risks. It was one boy in particular, my oldest one, who just has that personality and that quirk, and his brother was a pretty brave kid too. But it was, I talk some about the brain development in adolescence. The prefrontal cortex is not fully developed in adolescence. Sometimes it doesn't really develop until they're into their 30s, which I think was the case with Brennan. And that caused a lot of interesting experiences as they were growing up. And it's very funny. A lot of it's crazy stuff. My father, my husband is a very old school father. There's no tough love when they were getting in trouble, which is kind of a refresher from today. People coddle their kids. So I think, some people find that interesting. Some of those, I weave the old and the new, and a lot of stuff is woven through it.
So how did the family feel about you writing this book?
The oldest boy, even though he shared that journal with me, was very cooperative. Both of them were, but he was very nervous about putting his life out there. You have to be careful what you say. In fact, I had Jack take he bought this journal in an Arabic store, an Egyptian store, and there's Arabic writing on the bottom. I had Jack take that out.
The Arabic part?
Yeah, just take it off the cover. Just have the pretty colors on the cover. It has nothing to do with anything that he believes in. It's just that it was there, and how tense things are here in our country. So that's the kind of thing you have to tiptoe around, I think. And the reason I was so alert, I was very alert in my first book, writing about Harlem and a lot of interracial stuff. But I lost my train of thought.
We're talking about how the family felt.
Yeah, and the other son was totally fine with it all the way. But I wrote an article for Salon, that online newsletter magazine. I think it was Slate, one of the two, Salon. And it was about raising biracial kids. One of my boys is my color, and one of the other ones is, you can kind of see him on this cover, is my husband's light. You can't
More
really
fair
tell.
skin. Uh-huh.
Yeah, the darker one and the lighter one. Well, the comments were just, I mean, terrifying. They told me to stop reading, and they also messed with it because I had not really taken the tone that the editors there took. That's the beauty of being able to write your own book and self-publish it, is you don't have people messing with. I think they were looking for sensation, so they kind of, jazz things up, and they really jazz things up. I got a lot of comments. And I only read about 4 of them. That was enough. Brennan read most of them. So yeah, he was very leery about this book, but he's okay with it now. And I cleaned up some of his crazy behavior and my husband's crazy behavior. I didn't, go to extremes you don't need to do that. There's enough examples. I mean, I just didn't use those examples,
Well, and your husband he's a retired attorney, correct?
But he's not quite retired. He's,
okay.
Slowing down.
Yeah. And so he was also probably looking at it from that perspective. And
not really.
No. Oh, that's great that he trusted you, just as whatever you want, dear.
Oh
yeah.
No, he took over, but he didn't help him. Like one of them spent the night in jail because he had a DUI and flipped the car over. They called me in the middle of the night it was a suburban jail. Fortunately, we live in the city, but it wasn't a city workhouse. Your son is, in our jail, and if you are able to pick him up if you like. I mean, just assuming I pick him up. I wake Mike up, I'm like in the panic. Mike, it's 2:00 in the morning. Mike, Brendan had an accident. He's okay. Nobody got hurt. But they have him in jail. They want us to come get him. And he wakes up and he says, well, God damn it, leave his ass there. And that's what he said. Me at 2:00 in the morning. And I was just a wreck. And then I began to think, well, he's okay. Everybody else is okay. This will teach him a lesson. And it did. He couldn't get he did have his license then. Once he took the car before he had his license, that's the kind of thing I write about, dealing with kids who take risks. And
I know.
Sort of.
Yeah. I know that you also, you worked with an editor and you were a member of a book club, and you had members of your book club as reviewers of your book. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yes. I really took my time, and I had people read sections of my book or the whole book, and it took quite a while before I had tough enough skin to accept their criticisms. And that's after you go to a lot of classes and you learn, everything you've done wrong, kill your babies. I finally learned that you got to do that and all that kind of stuff.
We'll explain that in a minute. Yeah.
Yeah. Finally, I broke the first book up into 15 chapters, I think. And I gave each member of my book club, these are women who are avid readers and whose opinions I trust very much when they're analyzing a book. There was no way they could get, kind of hooked into the story, because they didn't really know what I was talking about, because they only had 10 or 12 pages or so. Because friends are not generally good editors at all. They are too nice, or they're not honest enough, or they don't know what they're talking about. So this worked amazingly well. I actually had a couple of examples of the kind of thing a good reader can find. The most helpful comment they wrote was, well, what happened to all these people? You're talking about the heroin epidemic hitting Harlem. So I did a little appendix at the back where I told everyone where they were. A lot of the kids I grew up with are dead. Heroin, or mostly that, particularly the boys, got them. I'm an English person, and someone said, no, you didn't italicize all the foreign words. It's like, duh, yeah, I should know that. Stuff like that. You know, some people were just like grammar Nazis, and others were just wonderful, astute, insightful comments, because
So it's
they
probably,
just had, yeah, I recommend doing that, breaking up the book.
well, and I like the idea of is also communicating with those people who you've given the single chapters to, that, you know, maybe you're not looking for grammar and punctuation. You just want insight on content and flow.
Exactly.
And yeah.
Exactly. Some people are nervous in reviewing. They're not, none of them are writers in this group. And they're nervous because they think they're going to tell you something that's wrong, or that you know better. But they're surprised that they can help me.
So if I'm thinking about writing a memoir, what are some of the opportunities? And we've got some feedback coming in here. Sorry, guys. I'll pause. Okay, we got rid of the echo, hopefully. What are some of the out of the box opportunities that you found? We'll get this out yet, people. About adding content or digging and finding content. What are some of the things that you did to help generate that content?
I went back. It was easy to go back to the old neighborhood, walk the streets. I interviewed some of the old people. There's so much history in Harlem. There's a building on my street that someone told me that his first name was Harold, Mr. Harold, I can't remember his last name, had lived in the building since right after what's his name, Babe Ruth lived in the building. We lived right by
Wow.
New York Giants Stadium, Polo Grounds, and Yankee Stadium was just across the river. And I taped his interview. I went to visit old people in the neighborhood. Most of them would not talk about their life in the South, including my family, which they just wouldn't do that.
What do you think? Yeah, what do you think the fear was? Just talking about, because I grew up in the South, and I think one of the threads that I heard a lot was, you don't talk about family stuff. You know, that stays in the house, kind of stays within the family.
Well, they would talk about the family, you know, grandma or Uncle John or that kind of thing.
Each other, yeah.
Yeah. But I think it was during Jim Crow. These were all people on my block and most of Harlem that were, you know, the great migration from the South in the 50s. My grandmother came up in the 30s, I think, from the South, from Virginia. And the reason most of them left is because life was pretty unbearable down there. And if I probe and pry and prod and try and get them to talk about, well, what was it like, you know, in your grocery stores and your schools, and a lot of pictures would kind of tell the story. Of course, they were all segregated. I mean, I was amazed that St. Louis was segregated until the 60s. That's a whole other story. But so yeah. But the other big thing, of course, is to read about your subject matter. Read other memoirs. I was looking for a voice to write. Harlem, I think, can't, you know, deny that there's kind of a little bit of a street culture there that I was partly writing about. And I happened to come across The Liars Club by Mary Carr. She grew up in tough-talking Texas oil field country. Totally not what I needed, but it just gave me the idea, okay, this is the kind of voice, and somehow it just came to me. I mean, it's correct grammar and everything, but I just can't explain it. It just helped me with the voice. some of the books that came out, I was reading about Harlem, Down These Mean Streets by Perry Thomas, and there was another one. These were kids who grew up maybe a little older than me, who had just a tough time. Now, we had it pretty nice on Sugar Hill. The contrast is what I try. It was like a gift our family gave us, and they didn't want us to know what life was really like for some Black people, although it was all around us in Harlem. But I wanted to talk about the good points. And I read McBride's book, The Color of Water. And that was a very inspiring book. And then I was just talking about reading, writing. This is for any book. I read Stephen King's book on writing. I can't remember the name of it. He's the one that coined the term kill your darlings. I mean, you have a great even chapter, not even just a paragraph, that is just bogging down your story, but you don't want to, and it doesn't really go with anything. It just sounds good. You got to get rid of that stuff. I mean, it's just put it in a folder with discards, and you might realize that everything cleans up. I mean, that's how you write. And I think it's harder with a memoir because it's so personal. You don't want to lose this stuff. You want to keep all your baggage, good and bad. Well, those are some of the things. Of course, when I was starting out, there weren't as many resources as there are now. I mean, I went to so many workshops. Writers groups were really good because they would critique your stuff. And like I said, it took me a while before I could really get into, the negative criticism, not in an ugly way, but important ways. Research, check your facts. I did not have Google or the internet when I wrote that book. Maybe towards the end, I was at the library. The libraries were very cooperative. Some of the research libraries let me into their archives. Schomburg Library in Harlem. Jumel Mansion is one of the places. It's where George Washington, that's all the colonial history I bring into the book. It's just wonderful colonial history in Harlem. They let me into their attic and it just showed me these amazing documents. I wish I had a camera phone. I didn't have a camera phone then. They would have at least let me take a picture of the outside of the documents, and that would have been maybe something I could put in the book. But I have a couple of old photographs from the research centers. There's probably more. I just can't think of other things that really get you going with
that research. Yeah. So
yeah,
now
research.
once you have the book in hand, what was the best advice that you got with respect to publishing your self-published book itself?
Oh, make sure it's perfect. By the time my friends and I must have written 40 different copies of this book, the manuscripts, different versions, cleaning it up and cutting it down. Just make sure it's the best book you could possibly put out. When I got some of those awards and I went to, I guess I got 2 of them one night, Senator Tom Udell was there. He had, there was someone who had done a biography of him. There were all kinds of university presses that had won awards. A book on Alexander McQueen, the dress designer, that the Museum of Modern Art had put out. I mean, their publishing arm, I'm pretty sure, and not just in their library. So it's a very well-respected genre. Way of doing books now. If I knew how to market, I maybe could have made, a lot of money. I maybe got close to getting even on this book. But self-published authors are not looked down on except by the publishing industry. I was telling Cathy when I was at the book expo, I was so excited and I was mingling and people were coming up to me, and I went and I talked to one of the big publishers, their booth, and I had my medal around my neck, and Well, yeah, but they give so many, instead of just giving one the best book of the year, like the Pulitzer or the Nobel Prize, they give, one on well, they give three categories: gold, silver, and bronze in travel or memoir. So she just totally, dismissed it. But I don't think they're dismissing self-published books anymore. But there are a lot of charlatans out there who say they're editors and say they're, illustrators, not charlatans, but people who just aren't as good as you can get. So get a lot of recommendations.
It's very much a buyer beware market.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I know last month we interviewed someone on book marketing, and next month we have someone coming up on book marketing again. And I know you did a book launch, which I thought was a fabulous event. It was out at the airport. Can you talk a little bit about that? I thought that was a great venue.
Yes, the airport for my travel book, they have party rooms up there, and they will do the catering, which was fabulous. And it's not terribly expensive, rather than going to renting a restaurant or, I'm not sure where else you have these kinds of things. Your home, if you have a big enough home. And the menu, the theme and the view of the tarmac and the planes coming in and out when there were lots of traffic up there. It was fun. Yeah. All my friends came. Good pictures. Just a good night. It was a good night to thank people. Oh, they did end up buying a book usually. To thank friends and give a party, something way to entertain. So I did not do press releases. I guess I just don't know how to do that kind of stuff. You could really run with that kind of thing when you have a book launch.
And there are people, I know, a lot of our function in putting your book together is whatever we didn't do in-house, we were able to introduce you to people that could help with certain things. So
yes,
there was someone that helped with publicity. You actually got an interview on one of the TV stations, as I recall. Is that right?
I was on Channel 2, and I was on NPR, and I was on the Webster Groves. They have a radio station.
WKRH, right?
Yes,
yeah,
like a community radio station. And I think there might have been one more. Yeah, very, very good.
Was
publicity.
It the Webster Kirkwood Times? I couldn't remember.
Well, no, it was on the radio. It was
it radio? Okay.
Yeah, it was live radio.
So there are people that you can hire to help get these things. Yeah.
And the lady who, I can't remember her name, she was wonderful, who did the radio show. She gave me all kinds of tips to ways to market the book. I have them written down, and I probably didn't do any of them. Go to places. I did so much marketing when the first book came out in 2012. I just got worn out, and everything's different now. I have to learn the new.
And even now, since the quarantine, everyone's still trying to redefine what that means and what it looks like. Yeah. Yeah. So
I also did a lot of traveling. I went to New York a lot, but it was easy. I could stay with friends, and sometimes you'd get paid for talks. It sparked a lot of interest in New York. You call the papers, send your book to the editor at the, just as the pandemic hit, I kind of was, thinking of doing that to Post-Dispatch. They do a lot of self-published authors.
They do support the local authors quite a bit. There were and the local bookstores also.
Yes.
The Novel Neighbor and even there's the Barnes and Nobles, the one in Ladue, there's one out in Chesterfield, and the one in West County Mall. Those are the three that I know of that really support local authors also.
Yes, they do. And Bookhouse in Maplewood.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mhm.
So I don't notice any questions in the chat. So if you have, we're about ready to round up here. If you do have any questions for Terry, please make sure you get them in that chat. And so what is the biggest piece of advice? If you look back over your experience of all 3 books, some you wrote about families, some you wrote about heritage and history, a little bit of you in there. What's the best piece of advice that you could give someone who's at the beginning stages of writing their book?
Well, you know, I've seen a lot of people who ask me to read their books and their material, and they really haven't, you know, as I said before, they haven't, and I think that's rare, less common now. They haven't really learned how to write very well. Certainly not to edit it, clean it up, develop it. Again, it's just write a good book, no matter how long it takes you. And I know some subject matter is topical and date related, but
well, and if there's something, I know one of the hardest lessons for me has been, if there's something I don't know how to do, ask for help. Yeah.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Yeah, we're not all born authors, and we're not all born editors. We're not all born book designers, and that quite often it takes a team to pull that book together. Yeah. Well, Terry,
I do think you have to be careful, though. Again, yeah, be careful who you use. Yeah, a lot of good people, but check them out.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Terry, so much for being here today, and thanks to everyone who was able to join us. As I mentioned earlier, our next Lunch and Learn interview will be on August 27th. It's always the third Thursday. It's August 27th, whatever Thursday that is coming up. And we're going to be interviewing Joanne Weiland. She's the owner of link2expert.com. They link experts with speaking opportunities, and she has 181 ways to market yourself as an author, speaker, trainer, expert. So that will be a fun conversation to have with her. She's actually out of the Tampa area, but works with authors all across the country. So we're pulling her in August. Thanks everybody for being here. And there will be an email that goes out either Friday or Monday that has a link to the recording, as well as Terry, if you don't mind, we'll add your email in there in case somebody has any questions about memoirs, they can reach out.
Sure.
Great. Thanks, guys, for being here. We'll see you next month. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.